is what is making news right now. As attacks continue, who really started it?
Israel broke the ceasefire.
But Israelis say, not true. We will fact check it fairly, honestly. But this is important, and this is something I want to break down for the viewers. Yesterday, you and I were sitting here, and we had a conversation with Mustafa Barghouti, who's an independent legislator, Palestinian legislator. Right. And he said that most news organizations have ignored the possibility that the people who actually broke the ceasefire was not the Palestinians or not Hamas in Gaza. What he said was, in fact, I think we've got that. Dan, play this, and then we'll give you some more information on it. Let's go ahead and go to that.
The world press community or media community is overwhelmed with the Israeli narrative, which is incorrect. The Israeli spokesperson have been spreading lies all over. The reality and the truth is that the side that broke this truce and this ceasefire was Israel. 2 months before it ended, Israel started attacking Rafah, started attacking Khan Yunis, and never lifted the blockade on Gaza. Gaza remained without fuel, without electricity, without bread, without medications, without any medical equipment for people who were dying in Gaza. 262 people died, sick people, because of an access to medical care. So Israel broke the ceasefire.
And you know what we did? I've checked with some of the folks here at our international desk, and I went to them and asked, what was he talking about, and do we have any information on that? Which they confirmed 2 months ago. This is back in November. There was an attack. It was an Israeli raid that took out 6 people. Now, let me refer you. It's not just us. We checked in other periodicals. Johnny, go over my shoulder if you can. Here we go. The 6-month ceasefire started coming apart at the beginning of November after Israeli commandos killed a team of Hamas fighters during a raid on a tunnel they suspected was being dug for kidnapping of Israeli soldiers. That raid set off more Palestinian rocketing. That's U.S. News and World Report. I got another one for you, I believe, here. Okay, this is The Guardian. Questionable, but nonetheless. A 4-month ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza was in jeopardy today. This was actually reported when it happened, after Israeli troops killed 6 gunmen in a raid in the territory. That's important to report. And here we go as well from theeconomist.com. And the point of contention here is this one. Johnny, one more. The last straw came in November when Israelis killed 6 gunmen, it said, were digging tunnels to launch a raid onto Israel, spurring Hamas to respond with a barrage of rockets. So the question is to who started this. And we've been hearing that the Israelis say they had to do this because suddenly the ceasefire had been broken in Gaza by the Hamas and the Palestinians. Is this now a little more in question?
You know, that is absolutely true, but just as true is the fact that if Israel hadn't started shooting first in this case, and Israel said, we had security reasons, imminent security reasons, there was no real deal here between Hamas and Israel. Israel still reserved the right to go in and do any attack where there was a primary security interest there. And they said, our soldiers were going to be kidnapped. We had to do it.
But, you know, I guess what it is, Americans, we like our order. We want things delineated for us. We like to see a quid pro quo. They're saying this happened. Are they right? And they're saying this happened. Are they right? It's almost like we're left, when you talk about the Middle East, you're left with such subtleties that sometimes everything is a vaguer.
Throughout Israel, about soldiers, war, and morality. 2 months after the war in Gaza, Israeli soldiers are providing the accounts of what they saw and did on the battlefield. And some of those accounts are deeply disturbing. Here's Simon McGregor-Wood.
After 3 weeks of fighting in Gaza, Israelis expected accusations from the Palestinians, even from human rights groups, and they came. The army had used disproportionate force, had targeted civilians, had even committed war crimes. The army denied it, and the public accepted the denial. But now, for the first time, disturbing evidence from Israeli soldiers themselves, personal accounts from the front line, published word for word in the newspapers. From Aviv, a squad leader. One of our officers saw someone walking on a road, an old woman. He sent people up onto the roof, and using machine guns, they took her down. Ram, another infantry commander. The feeling was that the lives of Palestinians were much less important than the lives of our soldiers. That was how they justified it. And there was this cell phone video of an officer's briefing on the eve of battle. If a person comes towards you, the officer says, even if unarmed, and we've shot in the air, and he keeps coming, this person is dead. The army rushed to defend itself. Ours is the most humane army in the world, he said. Isolated cases, if found, will be dealt with. The Israeli army enjoys a special status here. Every Israeli serves in it. It really is their army. And they don't like to hear bad things said about it. But when the criticism comes from soldiers, it's not so easy to ignore. And there's more to come. A group of former soldiers is collecting evidence from colleagues who fought in Gaza. They're hearing similar stories of a shoot-first policy.
It's troubling for me as somebody who lives here, as somebody who sees his future here, somebody who loves this place.
They don't hold out much hope for the army's own investigation. They do hope the stories of ordinary soldiers will encourage a debate about what really happened in Gaza and what is happening to their army. Simon McGregor, Wood, ABC News, Jerusalem.
A Russian
non-combatant, a distinction that is so important.
Mr. Regev, I need to clarify this tonight because clearly the evidence you're giving us must be given to the war crimes investigations that are being carried out in Gaza. You are saying that our evidence of flechettes, of phosphorus bombs, of fragmentation bombs, of shells that hit balconies and then spewed shrapnel around the walls, these things were done not by Israel, but by Hamas, correct?
I did not say that whatsoever, sir. You're putting words in my mouth. All I said was any objective journalistic or otherwise investigation is extremely difficult to do in a situation where people are not free to give evidence of what they saw.
Mr.
If people
Regev,
understand...
I can assure you that Mr. Miller has been in very many conflicts, Congo and many others, and is extremely experienced and has moved perfectly freely around that territory. There is no question of his having been strong-armed by Hamas, or indeed the people that he has spoken to having been strong-armed by Hamas. As you well know, Hamas is virtually in hiding when it comes to these situations.
Not anymore. They came out since the fighting started, and they've been taking their revenge very strongly against their political opponents, as we've been documented. But can Mr. Miller walk down the street in Syria and ask people, do they like President Assad? What will they say? If he walks down the street in North Korea, do you like President Kim? What will people say?
Mr.
Hamas is an authoritarian regime.
Jonathan Miller is not in North Korea. Jonathan Miller is not in Syria. He is in Gaza. And he has reported
an authoritarian regime, sir.
Heinous,
a very authoritarian regime.
He has
a very authoritarian regime. Do you deny
material.
that Gaza has an authoritarian regime?
I'm grateful to you for joining us. A Disasters Emergency Committee aid appeal for Gaza is going ahead without TV channel support after reported disagreements among the main broadcasters. Please enjoy both commercial and tourist relations with Turkey, and you've now rewarded it by attacking a fleet of ships that's come from Turkey and killed Turkish nationals. That's a great way to win friends, isn't it?
Yes, this is unfortunate indeed. Obviously, over the last few months, the relationship with Turkey the atmosphere has been less positive than it was historically. We think that's regrettable. We'd like to have a much more positive relationship with Turkey, and we'd hope the Turkish government feels the same way about us.
So you're going to apologize to them?
For what?
Killing their nationals.
Well, it has to be very clear what happened and how this incident actually developed. There were 6 interceptions yesterday, 6 interceptions, all done by the Israeli Navy. All 5 of them were done peacefully, without violence, without harm to soul, to people. In one place, unfortunately, the hardcore extremists on the boat, as your previous piece showed, used violence, and our soldiers who were in the operation had to defend themselves. They were under very, very serious threat. Their lives were under threat. They had to respond.
But as we've also shown tonight, the actual boarding of the Turkish ship, which must have been the most sensitive object in this entire fleet, was completely cack-handed.
Well, once again, obviously we're investigating what happened because we're not happy with the fact that there were 9 fatalities. But our servicemen went into this operation as a police operation. The idea was just to take control of the boat and to bring it into the harbour of Ashdod. That was the goal. And obviously the aggression, the violence, the attacks from the people on the boat on our servicemen was something that was enormous. Our servicemen were under a very, very real threat, a very present threat, a threat of their lives, and under such circumstances they are entitled to defend themselves as are British servicemen in similar situations.
Have you learnt from what you've done in the last 48 hours? Are you going to be treating the Rachel Corrie, which is on its way from Turkey even now as we speak, is that going to be treated with better respect? Are you going to allow it into its justified port of Gaza?
Why justified? I mean, you raise a whole series of issues there, and I'd like to answer each one if I could.
Well, if I
On the
could
issue
just
of the
follow up
blockade.
on that. I mean, the point is the United Nations, just about every world leader has told you to lift the illegal blockade on Gaza. And that's been asked for immediately by the Security Council.
So, first of all, a blockade is a legitimate tool when you're in a conflict, and of course you know that we're in a conflict with that Hamas regime in Gaza. There's a state of conflict. The United Nations, according to the United Nations rules, a naval blockade is totally legitimate form of international behavior. It even appears, I believe, in Article 47 of the United Nations Charter. To say that it's illegal, I don't know exactly what you're talking about. As to the sanctions on the Gaza Strip, they are a response to violence from Gaza into Israel. That's also a perfectly legal form of international behavior.
Well, what are you going to do about the Rachel Corrie if
past,
it attempts to go in? What are you going to attempt to do to the Corrie?
Well, the first thing I'll say, anyone who is bringing humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, we promise that if you bring that aid to our port of Ashdod, we will guarantee that all humanitarian aid reach the people in Gaza. And if they don't want to deal with us because they don't like us, there's a Muslim country and an Arab country, Egypt, has made a similar offer through its port of Al Arish.
Yeah, but the reason nobody wants to take you up
boats,
on your offer is because you can't be trusted.
Why is that?
Because you have
on the
severed
contrary.
80% of the aid that's been going into Gaza. It is down to 20% of the levels. This is according to the International Red Cross and the United Nations. It's down to 20% of levels before you started strangling the place.
Let's be very clear here. They don't want us to take us up on the offer. It's because they want to make a political statement to break the blockade. It's not because they don't believe the aid won't be delivered. And may I just explain to viewers why we need that blockade, if you'll allow me? It's clear that if that blockade did not exist, if we didn't have the naval blockade on the Gaza Strip, you'd have the inclusion into Gaza of very dangerous weapons and missiles from Iran, from Syria. You know that from the Gaza Strip, thousands of rockets had been fired on Israeli cities, on Israeli civilians. The short-range rockets are made indigenously in the Gaza Strip. The longer ones, the more dangerous ones, those ones with the most powerful warheads, are military-range Grad rockets. They come, of course, from Syria, from Iran.
Right.
We have to check cargo going into the Gaza Strip.
Let me ask you this then. If your allies, the Turks, and they are still technically allies, decide to accompany the next flotilla with a warship, what are you going to do? Because they're saying they're going to.
Sort of hypothetical is...
No, they are saying, they're actually saying...
About?
The Prime Minister said in Parliament today that the next flotilla will very likely be accompanied by a Turkish warship. What will you do? What will you do?
I don't think this is serious.
What will you do?
Sir, I don't think it's serious.
Of course it's serious. Of course it is serious. This is an incredibly serious situation. This could result in major warfare.
The Turks are about to send warships. You're telling me the Turks are about to send warships to attack Israel?
Well, why don't you get on the telephone and
really,
ask
sir,
them? Why don't you get on the telephone and ask them?
I don't think it's serious.
Don't ask me
where you got this from.
Don't ask me if I'm serious. Check with the Turks. Mark Regev, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome back to Hardball. We're back with the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. His new book is called Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And President Carter, why did you use the word apartheid in the book's title?
Well, let's look at the entire title, if you don't mind. The first word is Palestine, which involves the land that belongs to the Palestinians, not the Israelis. I didn't refer to Israel because there's no semblance of anything relating to apartheid within the nation of Israel. And I also emphasized the word not, that is peace and not apartheid. That's what I hope to accomplish with this book, is some move toward that goal. But there's no doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid. The occupation of Palestinian land, the confiscation of that land that doesn't belong to Israel, the building of settlements on it, the colonization of that land, and then the connection of those isolated but multiple settlements, more than 200 of them, with each other by highways on which Palestinians can't travel, and quite often where Palestinians cannot even cross. So the persecution of the Palestinians now under the occupied territories, under the occupation forces, is one of the worst examples of human rights deprivation that I know. And I think
even worse, though, than a place like Rwanda?
Yes, I think, yes. You mean now?
Yes.
Yeah,
You're saying the oppression now of the Israelis, of the Palestinians by the Israelis, is worse than a situation in Africa like the oppression of Rwandans and the Civil War?
I'm not going back into ancient history about Rwanda, but right now, the persecution of the Palestinians is one of the worst examples of human rights abuse I know, because the Palestinians...
You're talking about right now. You're not talking about, say,
I'm not talking about ancient history. No.
Well, Rwanda wasn't ancient history. It was just a few years ago.
You can talk about Rwanda if you want to. I want to talk about Palestine. What is being done to the Palestinians now is horrendous in their own territory by the occupying powers, which is Israel. They've taken away all the basic human rights of the Palestinians, as was done in South Africa against the blacks. And I make it very plain in this book that the apartheid is not based on racism, as it was in South Africa, but it's based on the desire of a minority of Israelis to acquire land that belongs to the Palestinians and to retain that land, and then to exclude the Palestinians from their own property and subjugate them so that they can't arouse and demonstrate their disapproval of being robbed of their own property. That's what's happening in the West Bank. And the people in this country, in America, never know about this. They never discuss this. There's no debate about it. There's no criticism of Israel in this country. And in Israel, there is an intense debate about the issues in this book. In this country, no.
I agree. I mean, I wish we had that sort of debate that they're having in Israel. I wish we had that in the United States. But give us a sort of sense, how much of the responsibility for the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, do you think belongs to the Israelis for their tactics like seizing land and occupying territory that didn't belong to them? How much of it is the responsibility of the Palestinians for their suicide terror attacks and their bombings within Israel proper?
Well, as a matter of fact, the basic cause of the conflict is a sustained occupation of other people's land by the Israelis. And this is a direct violation of United Nations resolutions. It's a direct violation of the International Quartet's roadmap. It's a direct violation of the commitments that leaders of Israel have made in the past at Camp David when I was president and in Oslo, promising that Israel would withdraw from occupied territories. They have failed to do so. In response to that, and I'm not excusing them, there have been acts of violence. As a matter of fact, though, Hamas, the #1 accused persons of violence, have not committed an act of suicide bombing that caused an Israeli life now since August of 2004. And I hope that they won't do that anymore. Other participants of the Palestinian society, smaller ones, have committed some atrocities. But the loss of life in the entire occupied territories has been horrendous and has been caused by
Herzog, who has been tasked with coordinating the aid agencies after the violence is over. Well, Isaac Herzog, this is one building which must have been the #1 do not hit, and you did it.
First of all, I can confirm most of the facts that were described by Mr. Ging. On the one hand, though, the operation started unintentionally because fire was launched at Israeli soldiers from the vicinity of the compound. And because people are under fire, sometimes they respond. The Minister of Defense and I were in a meeting with the Secretary General of the United Nations, and on the spot instructions were given to stop firing. And thereafter there was an apology which was given to the Secretary General. You should know that there are over a few hundred of such compounds and sites around Gaza Strip. So it is a mistake. We apologize for it, but it's not the #1 site in Gaza Strip.
It's very difficult to deal with because leaders all over the world have condemned this as an atrocity. Our own Prime Minister here has said it's utterly indefensible. After the apology was issued, you hit it again. Can you explain it? I mean, is somebody out of control in your armed forces? Is somebody attacking without the permission of the High Command?
Nobody is out of control. People operate under enormous stress. They've been attacked from all sides by militants, terrorists who've detonated almost every building and every street corner there. They've detonated even schools around that site. And therefore, when they opened fire and heavy fire, the fire was launched back. There may have been a mistake. We apologize for it. It happens. It happens to your forces in Afghanistan as well. Sometimes it happens when you defend your own people. Well, we had 5,000 missiles on Israel, and that's what we're trying to do.
With respect, Minister, the UN has not been attacked by Western forces in Afghanistan, so far as it's possible.
So we apologize for it.
Well, that may be so, but you have
that's true.
You have maps, you have coordinates, you have people under tight control, you have a sophisticated army, and you went ahead and did it. You've been at this for 3 weeks, and you haven't hit the building yet. It's the most important UN building in the entire Strip, and you did it.
That's not true, first of all, and with all due respect, I beg you to, I think you have to look at it proportionately, because fire was shot from that area constantly, ongoingly, on Israeli soldiers and commanders who are trying to find those missiles. That is not what the launched at families in Israel.
That is not what the commanders told John Ging.
I didn't say it
you
from
heard
the
him say
compound.
that.
I said from around the compound.
Yeah, no, he was not told that by the commanders on the ground. No allegation of that sort was made. If you are saying that, then you are also saying that the UN's senior official in the Gaza Strip is lying.
What I said was that according to our information, there was fire from that area around the compound. We are actually investigating this event, as was rightly said by Mr. Ging. We are investigating it, and you know that in Israel we take these things seriously, and we are looking into it throughout the chain of command.
Minister, thank you very much for joining us. Policyholders who lost
Well, one of the big problems is, and here goes the grenade, Israel. The second you mention the word Israel, the nation Israel, the concept Israel, many in the American press become very defensive. We're not allowed to be highly critical of the state of Israel. And the other thing we're not allowed to do is discuss the notion that Israel and the notion of Israeli interests may in fact be dictating what America is doing. That what we're doing in the Middle East may not be to the benefit of America's national security, but to Israel's national security. But see, we don't want to talk about that because one of the great success stories out there is the pro-Israeli lobby that has successfully enabled themselves to blend the two together so that when we speak of Israeli interests, they say, no, we're speaking of American interests. It's interesting that AIPAC and other elements of the Israeli lobby don't have to register as agents of a foreign government. It would be nice if they did, because then we'd know when they're advocating on behalf of Israel or they're advocating on behalf of the United States of America. I would challenge the New York Times to sit down and do a critical story on Israel, on the role of the role that Israel plays in influencing American foreign policy. There's nothing wrong with Israel trying to influence American foreign policy. Let me make that clear. The British seek to influence our foreign policy. The French seek to influence our foreign policy. The Saudis seek to influence our foreign policy. The difference is when they do this and they bring American citizens into play, these Americans, once they take the money of a foreign government and they advocate on behalf of that foreign government, they register themselves as an agent of that government so we know where they're coming from. That's all I ask the Israelis to do. Let us know where you're coming from, because stop confusing the American public that Israel's interests are necessarily America's interests. I have to tell you right now, Israel has a viable, valid concern about Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. If I were an Israeli, I'd be extremely concerned about Hezbollah, and I would want to do everything possible to nullify that organization. As an American, I will tell you, Hezbollah does not threaten the national security of the United States of America one iota. So we should not be talking about using American military forces to deal with the Hezbollah issue. That is an Israeli problem, and yet you'll see the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other media outlets confusing the issue. They want us to believe that Hezbollah is an American problem. It isn't, ladies and gentlemen. Hezbollah was created 3 years after Israel invaded Lebanon, not 3 years after the United States invaded Lebanon, and Hezbollah's sole purpose was to liberate southern Lebanon from Israeli occupation. I'm not here to condone or sing high praises and virtue for Hezbollah, but I'm here to tell you right now, Hezbollah is not a terrorist organization that threatens the security of the United States of America.
People have no chance to get their personal items out. They have no chance to call for help. And this is far away from most media outlets. You are amongst the very few journalists who have even seen this. European or American journalists who have even been here because people are afraid to come or it's too hard to come.
And one of the things we were told in Gaza by very respected Palestinian psychologist who had just completed a study of 1,000 Palestinian children was that they had discovered that many of these Palestinian children no longer had a will to live, that they were so dehumanized and so affected by seeing their fathers particularly beaten by Israeli defense forces, that the psychological condition is one of the dimensions of the conflict that is not widely understood.
Palestinians called for an international observer force that would stop the violence, but this action was blocked by Israel. Finally, a group of Palestinian and Israeli human rights activists together created the International Solidarity Movement, which has brought people from around the world of all ages and backgrounds to provide a nonviolent international presence to try to fill this need. Rachel Corey, a 23-year-old American student, went to Gaza to join in these efforts, sending back emails to her parents. I have been in Palestine for 2 weeks and 1 hour now, and I still have very few words to describe what I see. It is most difficult for me to think about what's going on here when I sit down to write back to the United States. Something about the virtual portal into luxury. I don't know if many of the children here have ever existed without tank shell holes in their walls, and the towers of an occupying army surveying them constantly from the near horizons. I think, although I'm not entirely sure, that even the smallest of these children understand that life is not like this everywhere. It was Sunday afternoon in Charlotte, about noon actually, and I received a phone call, and my son-in-law, Kelly, was on the phone, and he asked if Craig was there. And something about the way he asked made me realize, I felt right away that something was wrong. And then I asked, why, Kelly? And he hesitated for a minute, and he said, we've had some very sad news. And then my daughter, Sarah, I could hear her in the background, and she got on the telephone, and she said, Mom, it's Rachel. And I think the first words out of my mouth then were, is she dead?
We were opposing the demolition of farmland and other property, Palestinian property, by Israeli destruction forces and bulldozers. And the bulldozer drove up, and it kept going, and she tried to move back, but she couldn't move back, and she got caught underneath. She got caught underneath the bulldozer. Many other internationals began to surround the bulldozer and yell at it and tell us that there is somebody there, and it did not stop.
Where Rachel was killed, she was protecting a doctor's home. And that's important to realize. And the 3 children, his wife, she knew that family, and that doctor felt that Rachel was like a daughter to him. He bought that house. It was in the middle of the neighborhood. There were other rows of houses between his house and the border. Those other homes, those other streets were all destroyed, and now it's history. And I've had people say, well, she was in a war zone, and Cindy points out that war zone is people's neighborhoods. Those are children.
I'm here for other children. I'm here because I care. I'm here because children everywhere are suffering, and because 40,000 people die each day from hunger. I'm here because those people are mostly children. We have got to understand that the poor are all around us, and we're ignoring them. We have got to understand that these deaths are preventable. We have got to understand that people in third world countries think and care and smile and cry just like us. We have got to understand that they are us. We are them. My dream is to stop hunger by the year 2000. My dream is to give the poor a chance. My dream is to save the 40,000 people who die each day. My dream can and will come true if we all look into the future and see the light that shines there.
What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Permission to address the House to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Wake up, America. We have trillions for a war machine and the banks, while our government stands by and sniffs at the slaughter of innocents in Gaza, where Israel is blocking aid for wounded Palestinians. Here's today's Washington Post. It says the International Committee of the Red Cross said Thursday that it found at least 15 bodies and several children, emaciated but alive,
in a row of shattered houses in the Gaza Strip and accused the Israeli military of preventing ambulances from reaching the site for 4 days. 12 corpses lying on mattresses in one home, along with 4 young children lying next to their dead mothers. That's a quote. Today, U.S. tax dollars, U.S. jets, and U.S. helicopters provided to Israel are enabling the slaughter in Gaza. The administration enables Israel to press forward with the attack against defenseless civilians, blocks efforts at promoting a ceasefire at the UN, and refuses to make Israel comply with conditions that arms shipments not be used for aggression. Israel is going to receive $30 billion in a 10-year period for military assistance without having to abide by any humanitarian principles, international laws, or standards of basic human decency. Wake up, America.
Gentleman's time has expired.
A Palestinian detainee wearing a blindfold and handcuffs is ushered towards an Israeli jeep. Seconds later, a shot is fired, and the man falls to the ground. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem says he was hit with a rubber-coated steel bullet.
The soldier is firing at him from very close range, from approximately 1.5 meters away. This whole event happens in the presence of a high-ranking officer, a lieutenant colonel. He was hit in his leg. He wasn't even sure what actually hit him because his eyes were covered. He was hit in his leg. He has sustained
أمل خلف الأسفار يتسلل بين النار زرعت فيه الآلام بعزيمته إعصار وتسامى بالإيمان الصادق بل كالمارد سار بثبات رغم سكات وصمود رغم ضلال إنا لا نلقي بالا للآلام فتدابير الأيام ستداوينا وتعيد جراح اليوم لعادينا flash of white light lit up the sky over Gaza tonight. People running for cover, not knowing whether they're dead or alive. They came with their tanks and their planes, with ravaging fiery flames, and nothing remains, just a voice rising up in the smoky haze. We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight. Women and children alike, murdered and massacred night after night, while the so-called leaders of countries afar debated on who's wrong or right. But their powerless words were in vain, and the bombs fell down like acid rain. But through the tears and the blood and the pain, you could still hear that voice through the smoky haze. We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight. We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in the night without a fight. We will not go down in Gaza tonight. A blinding flash of white light lit up the sky over Gaza tonight. People running for cover, not knowing whether they're dead or alive. They came with their tanks and their planes, with ravaging fiery flames, and nothing remains, just a voice rising up in the smoky haze. We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not